Hello, my name is Sam Feltham and welcome to Expert Interviews here on Smash the Fat. For you today, we're going to be speaking with orthopaedic surgeon Gary Fettke on the nutritional model for modern disease. And he's all the way from the eastern coast of Australia. How are you going, Gary?
Hi, Sam. Good evening. It's evening here, morning there, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Exact opposites. You can almost not get further away from the UK to Australia, I think. And the only other option is Auckland, I think, obviously, you're across in New Zealand. So, yeah, you're pretty much as far away as you can. And where were you based again, Gary?
I'm in Tasmania, in
Tasmania,
that little island just to the south of Australia. So
yeah, it's like the Isle of Wight of Australia.
A wee bit bigger, but
yeah, fair, like probably about the size of Wales or something, is it?
It started out as a convict settlement, and I think that's probably why I'm allowed to speak out the way I do.
That's fantastic, mate. Brilliant. So as I said in the introduction there, we're going to be talking about your nutritional model for modern disease. But before we get into all that, how does an orthopedic surgeon get into this fantastic world of preventative medicine and nutrition?
Well, as most speakers, it's not a short story. First of all, I think I was raised on modern food and highly processed, and ended up being a fat kid. I then ended up with a few pimples, and I got bullying and all that sort of thing. And from 16 to 20, I exercised, played a lot of sport, all those normal things. But ultimately, I've always struggled with my weight, which is a common story. And the last several years, I've finally worked out what the reasons for that was. But I suppose the big thing for me was about 15 years ago, I ended up with a cancer. And that cancer, nothing like that to polarize your own health. And those people who actually are into this topic generally start here with a vested interest. And when you've got that vested interest, you sort of start looking at the science. So I've always looked at weight and tried how to control that. And I think we can unlock that now. And I now understand that food drives behavior. So we've been traditionally told if you're overweight, then you're generally a sloth and you're lazy and you're not eating properly and it's a bad habit and you've got no self-control. Well, I actually think now the more we look at the science behind it, actually the food drives that behavior. And so if you've got that understanding, then you're off to a better start. So that was one story there, that's been for me. Then my own story with my own health and the cancer has really sort of been sitting there on the back burner trying to work out probably why I got cancer, what I can do about it now and what I can do about it in the future. And then the third level is at my own professional side. So in orthopaedic surgery, we're doing a lot of surgery on people with broken bones, more importantly with joint replacement over time, and all the problems associated with obesity and joint replacement. So knee replacements are going up and up and up because osteoarthritis of the knee is getting more common, and that's directly related to our weight. So if we can lose weight, we don't need to do as much joint replacement. And some years ago, I think I'm still the first orthopaedic surgeon in Australia to refuse to operate on people who are too heavy. So I use a somewhat arbitrary cutoff of a BMI of 35, but that's that's morbid obesity. So if you're above that, I say, not on. We're not doing a joint replacement. But rather than actually say go away and lose weight, I come up with the whole concept of this is how you can lose weight. It does border down to LCHF and low carb healthy fat. In the last few years, however, I'm doing more and more foot surgery on diabetic patients. And in northern Tasmania, I get to do probably most of that diabetic foot complication surgery. And I used to see one person every 3, 4, 5, 6 months with a really horrible foot. And just take this week, I've seen another 3 patients. And so it's only Wednesday, and I've got 3 new patients with disastrous diabetic feet. So that to me is totally out of control. Last week I was actually operating in Vanuatu in the middle of the South Pacific. I go on a foreign aid project over there.
Brilliant.
And diabetes is, in that island nation, very much like the rest of the South Pacific, again, is out of control. And they can track it back to the introduction of Western food. So when you start looking at all of that, there are multiple layers as to why I've taken it on. But when you start chasing it backwards, our modern food's actually probably squarely to blame for virtually all of those modern disease problems we've got.
That's it. I mean, it all does come down to the nutrition change that we've gone through kind of in the past pretty much 150 years. There's been a steady change of kind of what's constituted as a daily diet for people. So let's start off with exactly what is modern disease.
Well, I'll come back one step, and I actually say I think we've evolved with one way of eating for 2.5 million years, and people say that what we're all talking about, increasing low carb healthy fat, is actually a fad diet. And I say, well, that's absolute nonsense. That's the way we evolved over a couple of million years. The fad diet's the one we've actually been on for the last, I think the hard fad diet's the last 30 years, 40 years.
Yeah.
But sure, we've evolved with toward more processed food in the last 150 years. So I agree with that. But the crisis point for modern disease has really been the last 30 years. And now it's playing catch up, and we're seeing that. So modern disease, well, modern disease is everything you look around you. Everyone you know, most people know someone who's got cancer. We've got an increasing rate of heart disease, heart attacks, strokes, even dementia. I mean, people used to die of old age, but now most people have got dementia on the way out. Our children, there's more autoimmune disease now than there ever has been. Type 1 diabetes is rapidly on the increase. Children's cancer is going up 3% per annum. Mental health is all on the increase. Mental health disorders in every country in the world, whether or not it's Australia, UK, or third world areas, wherever we've introduced modern diet, these conditions are on the increase. But it's not just those diseases, and they've got a personal cost. There's a major economic cost to this, and health is bankrupting our societies. It's not sustainable, and so therefore, if doing reactive medicine and finding, well, here's the problem, we'll do something about it, I think, well, that's not going to work. We've got to go back one step. How can we prevent it? And prevention actually is what we're all doing, what we're talking about now.
Excellent. And it's great to hear a surgeon that's looking for preventative medicine and kind of treatments that people can apply, so that obviously it prevents it, but also trying to reduce any risks with those that are morbidly obese as well, which is fantastic. Now, what particular nutritional constitutes are we talking about here that are causing these modern diseases?
I think under one umbrella we call it processed food, but I like to come back down to the basic science. And the basic science is the combination of sugar, and particularly fructose, refined carbohydrates, which is effectively glucose, and polyunsaturated oils, which come high in our processed food line. And I often talk about it a bit like fireworks. Each one by themselves isn't that much of a problem, but if you put them all together in just the wrong combination and the wrong amount and the wrong frequency, then you end up with a highly explosive, inflammable material. And that's really what I go through to explain the biochemistry and the science between combining those three things together. And when you do that, you end up with a highly inflammatory model. So one of the interesting things I've found is that the biochemistry of fructose, which is half of sugar, everyone says that's what you find in natural, fruits and that sort of thing. The biochemistry of that was pretty well just definitively described in 2010. So that is essentially brand new science. So anybody who's talking about nutrition and their understanding is before 2010, they're out of date. So fructose, and I don't think we've still got it completely worked out, but we've got it largely worked out. And when you look at fructose, that half of sugar, then it's a complex molecule, but it's actually, I think that's something which drives behaviour.
Mm-hmm. And in what way does it drive behaviour? Let's think about kind of as soon as you ingest it, what's the process here?
Well, I'll come back to looking at what happens in nature. If you look at a fruit tree, you've got fruit trees in a temperate climate, the fruit will ripen on it, and then overnight, when the fruit gets to a certain amount of sugar in the fruit, the local animals will come and strip it bare. We've got possums in Australia, we've got birds that will come along and absolutely strip a tree bare of its fruit in one night. And what happens is, I've come to recognise that the major component that probably drives that is fructose. So it's pretty hard to do this without some visual diagrams, and on my website, and there's a few of the talks which I sort of cover that with lots of pictures, and so you can actually go through it easily. But fructose has a multitude of effects. One of them is the thing which actually drives appetite. There's a chemical in the body called leptin, and leptin is produced by our fat. So when we've got plenty of fat on board, we produce plenty of leptin, and that's an appetite suppressant, and it works back at the hypothalamus in the brain. And that essentially means that if you're overweight, you actually don't need to eat. However, if you have fructose, it gets converted in the liver, ultimately to some fatty acids, and those fatty acids have a feedback loop back to the hypothalamus, and they block the effect of leptin. Now, that effectively means that you might be full, you've got enough calories on board, you've got enough storage of fat on board, you actually don't need to eat. However, you have the fructose, fatty acids then suppress that effect, and all of a sudden you're feeling hungry again. It also stimulates a chemical called ghrelin, which comes up from the stomach. And that ghrelin is the thing which makes your tummy rumble. Again, it's something which tends to make you hungry. And all of that's actually quite beautiful, because in nature, if you're an animal, you get this one opportunity when fruit ripens that you can actually stuff your face as much as you possibly can to store it away for winter hibernation. So the following day, you know, that behavior is there, and you need that in nature to survive.
Mm-hmm.
But the trouble in our society is that fruit tree, that chocolate bar, that bowl of lollies, that cans of soft drink are still available on the tree down at the supermarket the following day. So we're constantly exposed to it. We constantly are hungry. We constantly think, oh, we better store away for tomorrow. And that's just one of several pathways that it does. But fructose, along that line, it tends to drive appetite.
And it really is a vicious circle there, and it's something that, you know, every person on the planet pretty much is having to kind of deal with. That you do have this onslaught of sugary treats at every single supermarket, newsagent, any food shop that you've got in your country, on every single corner of almost every single street, and it's almost a constant battle for people to try and stop that. Now, as you were kind of saying earlier as well, it's not just the fructose component that's kind of like the initial linchpin that sets things off in terms of people seriously overeating and storing more body fat as well. But what's happening with the glucose part of that as well?
Okay, the overall model really is that sugar makes you hungry,
mm-hmm.
carbohydrate makes you fat, and the polyunsaturated oils make you inflamed and sick. One of the things about carbohydrate, which is effectively just glucose, right? Fructose is a carbohydrate, but it gets metabolized a bit differently. Carbohydrate, whether or not it's bread, rice, pasta, potato, milk, they're all effectively just glucose molecules. And glucose is one of our two fuel sources. The other one's ketone bodies, which come from fat, but glucose is that primary source. Now, the interesting thing about glucose is that you can only have about 4 grams of glucose in your blood at any point in time. Anything in excess of that, under the effect of insulin, gets turned to fat. So 4 grams of glucose is 1 teaspoon of glucose. When you look at a piece of bread, one slice of bread, doesn't matter if it's white bread, brown bread, wholemeal, whatever, it's got about 5 teaspoons of glucose. So if you have 1 slice of bread, your body will metabolize that at the brain and the muscle level, and the other 4 get turned into fat. So a standard bowl of rice or pasta, and we're not talking about big sizes, just a standard bowl's got about 16 to 20 teaspoons of glucose. So again, you have 1 that floats around your bloodstream and gets metabolized, and the other 15 to 19 get turned into fat. And the humble old potato, you know, a potato half the size of your fist has got about 6 teaspoons of glucose. Again, 1 gets metabolized, the other 5 get turned into fat. So I have a little term where I say, look, if you eat lots of potatoes, you're going to end up looking like a potato. You know, but that's where we're heading.
Pretty much.
So carbohydrate gets turned into fat. One of the important things that and there are a couple of us working on this around the world, we came across a thing called the polyol pathway last year. And the polyol pathway converts some glucose into fructose. And normally, for the average person, that's about 3% of the carbohydrate we take in gets turned into fructose. And I think that's probably in nature meant to try and drive behavior and try and keep you hungry when you've got a source of carbohydrate. The big problem we found out, really based on an article that's about 30 years old, is that if you are overweight and hyperinsulinemic, or if your blood glucose gets up a bit above 7, which isn't that high, you don't convert 3% of glucose into fructose, you convert 30%. You flip over and you convert 10 times as much glucose into fructose. Wow. And that keeps driving behavior. And that's the modern diet.
It's crazy. And people are eating these styles of food every single day, aren't they? It's absolutely crazy that the foods that people think are healthy, and we just had that sugar film starting screenings over here with Damon Gamo, and yeah, it's absolutely crazy that people are eating this on a daily basis, thinking that it's healthy for them, these styles of food, but it's driving all of the modern diseases that we're starting to get.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the processed food that's coming in. And now that we're getting overweight, we're not converting, we're not turning just the carbohydrate into fat. We're actually turning it into fructose. And in that model, we actually convert that into the bad, what we call LDLs. The lipoproteins are the ones that are associated with cardiovascular disease. That's another part of fructose metabolism, but ultimately fructose isn't just being converted into things which inhibit our leptin. It's actually getting converted into the particles which are associated with cardiovascular disease. And that's another pathway through this, again through the liver, called de novo lipogenesis.
Yeah.
So again, when you look at that pathway, we're producing, the more fructose we take in, the more we're producing from carbohydrate, the more small dense LDL particles we're producing. And that's where the third kicker comes in, which is the polyunsaturated oils. We know that the saturated fats are like the butter, the lard, the ghee, coconut oil. They're mostly saturated fat. That is, it's a solid at room temperature, and being solid at room temperature, it doesn't have many double bonds in it. Whereas the polyunsaturated oils, they're liquid at room temperature, and they get that liquidity from having lots of double bonds and flexibility. And that allows us to use, they come out of plants, and plants at cold temperatures need to still be alive. So they have that flexibility. The trouble is that flexibility comes from these double bonds. And each one of those double bonds is a point of weakness and what's called a point of oxidation. So if you oxidize a bit of steel, it rusts. And the same thing happens with a polyunsaturated oil. Each point of weakness becomes oxidized. And when at that oxidation, you effectively get this rust within the fat. And when stuff rusts, when it becomes oxidized, it produces these things called oxygen-free radicals. So a lot of people will have heard about those other little nasties which run around and cause damage to cell membranes, damage to DNA, damage to our nuclei. So what happens with these, and again, diagrammatic form, the listeners and viewers might want to go and look at that model to see with the pictures, but those small dense LDL particles that we're overproducing now and we're putting into our blood vessel walls, we're filling them up with polyunsaturated oils. When they get into the blood vessel walls, they become oxidized, they become highly inflamed, and then we end up with inflammation in the blood vessel wall. The trouble is, every organ of the body's got a blood vessel. And the more we keep producing, the more inflammation we occur. Those same polyunsaturated oils end up in the cell membranes, and they also end up in our mitochondrial membranes. The mitochondria is the little powerhouse of the cell, which actually drives the energy. And the trouble is, as a result of that, polyunsaturated oils and all this oxidation is occurring in our mitochondria and our engines. It's happening in our cell membranes, in every cell in the body, and it's becoming inflammation in the blood vessel wall. So nothing is immune. So everything is related to inflammation. Inflammation is at the root cause of modern disease. And here we are, we're stuffing this modern processed food down us, and we've just created the perfect storm. And, you know, I think a lot of that's actually preventable. Once you've got disease, a lot of it's reversible. But you've got to have an understanding that, you know, there is something happening here now.
Certainly, and it doesn't help the heart health organisations around the world keep on saying that people should be eating more polyunsaturated fats in terms of like vegetable oils, sunflower oils and things like that, and sort of still saying you should avoid butter and lard and all these saturated fats as well. So what's going on here with these heart health organisations?
Well, I mean, two things of that. I mean, the first one is that Professor Grant Schofield from Auckland University is a professor of public health. Mm-hmm. Grant and I will give you $10,000. Okay, it's only Australian dollars, but we'll give you $10,000 if you can explain to us how a saturated fat can give you cardiovascular disease. Okay. Awesome. If you can explain it, we'll give you the money. I can explain to you how a polyunsaturated fat will do it, but I can't. It's just there's nothing. You can't oxidize a saturated fat. You can't create inflammation with bricks. You know, it just doesn't happen. So, I mean, the British Heart Foundation, I think it's within the last 6 months, presented a paper that they sponsored, reviewing over 600,000 people, comparing saturated fats and polyunsaturated fats, and they found no increased evidence of cardiovascular disease in the group of people who had the saturated fats. And the British Heart Foundation still won't accept this concept, even though they actually sponsored the paper.
It's crazy.
The longer this goes on, the more ridiculous it is. The Australian Heart Foundation, and they keep quoting that they've reviewed the literature, they're a peak body. They last reviewed the literature on this in May of 2009. And their last quoted articles is 2008. So our peak heart body in Australia, which is advising government and bureaucracy, have openly stated, and again, it's only 3 months ago, that their literature's up to date, and it's only 2008. And as you know, this literature is exploding out of the internet. Mm-hmm. And you know, I think it's just ridiculous that they are still being held, you know, in their high regard. I think they're in strife, actually, the longer this goes on.
Yeah, it's going to get worse and worse. It's kind of like a teenager that's done something bad at home, like maybe smashed like a mother's vase or something like that, a really expensive vase or something, and they've hidden it. And like the longer that it goes on, the longer that they lie about it and things, then the worse that the repercussions are going to be. So it's kind of best just to admit it up front, get it fixed, and then move on.
And just admit that there's a variety of information. Like the Canadian, at least the Canadian Heart Foundation's withdrawn their tick program. You know, I call it the heart tick of death. You know, if you get that little tick on your symbol on your packaging, that's going to kill you.
I mean, you can walk around a supermarket and just see that it's utter BS. The heart ticks just by looking at the type of foods that it's on. It's like this cartoon character cereal box that's, you know, got blue bits of food in it, and it's got a heart tick, and it's like, well, Yeah, right.
It, just, it is. If it wasn't for the fact that this is actually causing harm, it would be funny, and that's
Yeah.
what drives me on, because I'm at the coalface, seeing the people who have had a lifetime of disease, or seeing kids who are now looking forward to a lifetime of disease, and that's the thing that drives me insane. And so people will, so I get a bit, worked up about it. But the fact is, this is the future unless we do something. So I'm going to keep having plenty of work until I retire, because I'm not going to solve everything for everyone right now. But I do care about what's going to happen with my children and my grandchildren. And I think that's where the future is. Because I think, to be fair to, old guys like me, you're still a young fella, but my generation has eaten itself into modern disease. And it's not going to reverse that population. But the next population coming through, there's some hope if they give it a go.
Yeah,
and that's really.
And I was just going to say, so what is the solution for health organisations around the world to start reversing these modern diseases, or prevent them as well?
Oh, look, I think it's about education, and then letting people make choices. And then once they've made a choice, then the market will respond to that.
And I suppose presenting the low carb healthy fat is at least a safe and effective option as well.
Look, if you smoke nowadays, you smoke cigarettes, then I'm sort of okay with it now. And I used to be, still am an anti-smoker campaigner. But there's enough information on the packet of cigarettes. There's enough knowledge out there that if you want to smoke, you've made an informed decision now to be an idiot. I'm okay with that, because you said, okay, I'm an idiot, I'm going to smoke, but that's fine. But there's so much confusion out there about what you eat, how to eat, what's good, what's bad. So many mixed messages. And I openly admit to actually being part of that confusion. And you are as well. You're spreading that message out there. We think we're on the right path, and the people who follow us are seeing that improvement. And the literature, the medical literature, is now backing all that up. We're not extremists. This is just all based on science. And I say to the doctors who, I have discussions with, I'm not making this up. This is just science. This is biochemistry. This isn't what you ate 10, 20 years ago now giving you disease. This is what happens to a molecule of fructose. This is what happens to a molecule of glucose. This is what a polyunsaturated oil does. You put it together, but here's the science. So what I say to my patients, I say, look, this is a choice. I've now given you some new information. I say to doctors, what happens if everything I'm talking about is right? And I encourage them to do what I did a few years ago now and say, start questioning, start reading, start doing the science. And if we can educate the doctors, and that's going to be a long, hard road, nonetheless, it's the only way forward. I gave one of my nutritional models of modern disease talks to the medical students last night. So, I've got 40 new potential doctors to work with that. In Vanuatu last week, I gave the talk to the leading doctors in the country. There's not that many, but for the next 3 days, they kept on having questions to me about it. And so therefore, if you can get the leaders to be educated, and I'm not talking about the government bureaucracies, I'm talking about the people in the community who are seen as leaders, then there's hope. The same thing goes with one of the church organisations in Vanuatu. They've got 60,000 members, and what they're trying to do is make each of their church congregations sugar-free. And they're doing that to educate the people, so that they can therefore, go and teach 50 pastors what to do. They then go around the country, and all of a sudden you start educating the community. So if you're going to wait for the government to get on board with this, it's not going to happen. There's too many vested interests. The food industry is involved, the pharmaceutical industry is involved, and we've really got to try and, look at that a bit differently. And so social media, to me, to me, is all about getting that education out there.
Absolutely, and it really is it has to be from the bottom up. It has to be a grassroots movement that's actually going to kind of turn the tide in this whole mess that we're in at the moment. And when the government starts to see that there's kind of like this uprising that's coming, then they'll have to change their tune, and also customer behavior as well. Because if people stop buying these types of foods, then the food companies will change.
Gluten is a classic example. I mean, if you wanted gluten-free food a few years ago, you really struggled to find it. Now there's entire rows of gluten-free food. I quite like the fact that the fruit juice section in our supermarkets is actually coming down.
Yeah.
You know, it used to be 10 metres and now it's down to about 5 metres.
Wow.
Now that's the market having an effect.
Yeah.
And so, and the medical profession is now having to respond to people asking them about it. So it used to be that the doctors would educate the patients. Now we've got a whole lot of patients coming to their doctors saying, look, I'm doing low carb, healthy fat. I've lost 5 kilos, I've lost 10 kilos. And the doctor is then saying to them, no, you can't do that, it's going to kill you. But I've actually noticed that you've actually lost weight, you're feeling better, you're looking healthier, and your blood tests are improving. And I've got, I've got hundreds of patients who have done that to their local doctors. They've actually addressed, they're doing what their doctors said not to do. And the doctors can no longer argue with the fact that, hang on, these patients are getting better. But they still tell them, don't eat all that butter, it's going to kill you. I say, well, come on, the patients are getting better, stop it.
Yeah, exactly. If it's working, it is working. That's it. Enough said. Results are results. You just can't really argue with that, can you? Well, hopefully that's going to kind of improve things like in all the local communities, at all the local GP surgeries and things like that. And then those GPs will kind of see those results and think, hey, there's got to be something to this, because so-and-so's getting better on LCHF, so-and-so's also getting better on LCHF. So, like, when all these case studies kind of build up, then they've got to, feed that curiosity.
We're quite proud of what's happening in Launceston in Tasmania. There's now at least one doctor in every general practice who is on board with LCHF.
Brilliant.
And sort of in my travels around, I get the impression that Cape Town's leading the way. Lots and lots of doctors are over there recommending it under the guise of Tim Noakes. And it was a great honour to go over to the World Summit and lecture over there in February. The next place, which is pretty well on board, is Auckland in New Zealand. And Grant Schofield and Karen Zinn, who you had on recently, they've done an enormous amount of work there. And I like to think that Launceston in Australia is coming in third there. And, we keep hammering the doctors, but in fact, as a community, we've got more doctors on board on this in Launceston than I think we have in the rest of Australia. So, those communities are now spreading the word, and it's getting out there. And I think in the next few years, this is going to be, as it's an increasing topic, and it's not, a little rise, it's, it's going up like that. And it has to, because it works.
Absolutely. I was looking at Google Trends the other day, and I can't remember the numbers, but basically the graph is like this over the past 10 years in terms of low carb searches is kind of going up, and then low fat is kind of like this. It's going down. It's absolutely brilliant. Google's a great tool to kind of find out, what the populace is thinking, because everybody just types in a question to Google to kind of find out stuff. So it's definitely on top of people's minds.
I might have to get that made up into a slide, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I'll send you through the link there, Gary. And
okay,
you can use it in your in any of your future lectures for sure. Unfortunately, that's all really the time that we've got today. But people can find out more information about yourself at your website and blog nofructose.com, and then they can also find you on social media, on Facebook. If they type into the search bar on Facebook, Gary Fettke, No Fructose, and then also on Twitter, Fructose No, and finally on Instagram is The Gary Science as well. Was there anywhere else that you wanted to point people to?
We've got our own, we've opened up the centre where we've got dietitians giving this advice and diabetes nurse educators, and that's Nutrition for Life, or nutritionforlife.healthcare. And we're doing some good in the community, and that's the fun thing.
That's fantastic. And with Nutrition for Life as well, are you seeing that, looking to expand that across Australia and possibly the world, or what's the plan with that?
Well, we're in Tasmania first of all, but we've got outreach centres already on the Gold Coast in Queensland and in Hobart in the south. We Skype interviews around Australia. We're trying to get that model right, and we've just employed another dietitian this week who's come from interstate. Do we want to conquer the world with it? No, but we're trying to actually set that example here in Australia.
Yeah.
And it's got a lot of interest in it. But we've got dietitians, diabetes nurse educators, nutritionists, and a naturopath, all working down the one pathway. And it's expanding, but that's, we're now employing up to 11 people with that now, from something that only started about 9-10 months ago. So it's good.
That's fantastic. Well, hopefully that will continue and then teach the rest of the world about how to set up these health centres and then improve health worldwide. That'd be fantastic.
Excellent. Look, it's been a great pleasure, and all we can do is hope that LCHF takes off, just like Australia's going to beat England in the Ashes starting today.
No chance. Absolutely no chance. Yeah, that's probably going to happen. But I mean, we've had Shane Warne on the show before, yeah, we'll see how you guys go, and Peter Bruckner as well. And I've been slipping in some controversial advice, trying to put a spanner in the works, but I don't think that's going to change his mind about how to advise all of the team.
Well, I know Peter's definitely LCHF, but is Shane Warne doing that?
No, not Shane Warne. What am I talking about? Shane. I can't. Shane Watson. What we're talking about? There you go. Like his name escaped me, because Shane Warne is from back in the day, right?
Shane Warne, I think, is still fairly well carb loading. All right.
Yeah, certainly. That's the one. Tell you, it was a W. There we go. So sorry, Shane, if you're watching or listening or anything like that. But as I say, that's all we got time for today. And also, there's only one more thing to do, and that's to hear us smash it out from Gary Fettke. So on the count of 3, Gary, I'd like to shout "smash it out" to the camera, or not too loud, because I know you've got a bit of a sore throat.
You giving me the count or not?
Yeah, I will say. So 1, 2, 3.
Smash it out. Thanks, Sam. Okay.
There you go, Gary. That's perfect, mate. Ideal. Everybody go check out Gary's website and blog, nofructose.com, and then you can go through to his social media from there. Check out his book, also Inversion, which you can check out on onemananswer.com. Is that correct, Gary?
Yeah, onemananswer.com.
Onemananswer.com. Sorry about that. Cool. And then until next time, take it easy and take care.
No worries. Thank you, Ken.
Thanks, Gary. See you, mate.